Welcome to the Misophonia podcast, and today we've hit episode 200. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. On this milestone episode, I'm talking to Georgie, a recent neuroscience and psychology dual degree grad from the University of Colorado, Boulder. This is perhaps a fitting conversation for the 200th episode because, like many of the young students and grads I've interviewed, Georgie represents, I hope, a better researched and informed future for misophonia, spearheaded by fellow misophones. Georgie's childhood also shares many characteristics that I've found to be common among us. That is, periods of walking on eggshells, turbulence, and volatility. She also mentions other sensory sensitivities such as visual triggers and the sensitivity to vibrations. She talks about coping methods, including white noise, headphones, and seeking accommodations at school. She explores the potential connection actually between misophonia and diet. And we talk about the many comorbid conditions, also very common among us, that she's been diagnosed with, and the medications she's taken and their effects on her misophonia. We talk about her interest in psychology and neuroscience and how she wants to use those to actually pursue a career in clinical psychology. And of course, she shares her experiences of social challenges and that shame and guilt that's often associated with misophonia. After this incredible show, let me know what you think. You can reach out by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. Please head over and leave a quick review or rating wherever you listen to the show. It really helps drive us up in those algorithms that help us reach more listeners. And I want to say again, episode 200, thanks again for the incredible ongoing support of our Patreon supporters who've helped us get here and will help us reach the next 200 episodes. If you feel like contributing, you can read all about the various levels at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. All right, now here's my conversation with Georgie. Georgie, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, yeah, you want to tell us kind of roughly where you're located and stuff?
Yeah, so currently I'm in Colorado. I just graduated from CU Boulder with a dual degree in psychology and neuroscience. And I'm taking a year out to try and figure out exactly what I want to do. So I'm just kind of floating around right now in Colorado, having fun.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. Neuroscience, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be great things, whatever you're up to, whatever you'll end up doing. So, we, just for the audience, we have a lot of notes to go through with Georgie. Fascinating story. I've been really excited for this call. There's a lot of overlap with, of course, what I've been thinking about, what listeners have been, what past guests have been talking about. So, Georgie, do you want to, I know we talked about maybe starting backwards or starting forwards. Let's just start from the beginning, maybe, if that's okay with you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what things were like when you first started noticing misophonia in your life?
Yeah, I think I've had anxiety pretty much my whole life. I've had panic attacks since the age of 6, really young. And it wasn't until I was about I guess this is still pretty young, 8 or 9 was when I started noticing my misophonia. And I know on some of the other podcasts, some people mention it's just they woke up and they kind of just noticed it, which I think is what happened to me. My memory from back then is not that great, but I do remember one really vivid memory, and I think that's when it all started. Was I was having a parent-teacher meeting, and I just remember being really irritated by my mother's voice, the way she pronounced her S's and T's, they were very soft, and for some reason it's still my biggest trigger, but that was my first trigger. And then I went out in the hallway. I didn't really know what was happening. I was just kind of agitated, and I grabbed my little iTouch and just started listening to music because I didn't know what else to do. And I feel from then on, I've had pretty bad misophonia. my mother's voice being the worst trigger. Um, yeah, I mean, I remember like at that age, I didn't know what was going on. I would, I mean, I'm still labeled as irritable, but I would be labeled as like irritable, rude, trying to be like controlling of the
Mm.
situation. And then I just kind of took that on and felt guilty because I didn't know what was happening. I was just
Labeled
feeling,
by your family members.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. Like for me, I feel like other people could relate. Like when you're in a state of pure rage, it's hard to be polite and
Yeah.
gentle with what you say. When like the only thing you feel is like adrenaline and rage, and you're about to cry. It's just impossible to be nice.
Right.
um, so I still kind of um, have issues trying to approach that, trying not to get snappy or like irritable, because it's like seemingly impossible for me.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and I guess when I was about 12 was when I read online what misophonia was. And I was like, oh my god, like other people experience this too. Like I'm not alone, which
About
was probably the
about
most.
10ish years ago, then, right? Um, about 10 years ago or so is when
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's when
22 now.
our articles started to come out and started to hit the media a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, 10 years ago. But there still wasn't much information about it then. It was just like, oh, this is a brief description. That's it. So I was like, well, at least I'm not alone. And at least I know I'm like not totally crazy.
Right.
um, but yeah, I noticed my misophonia kind of um, like gets worse and gets better because I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I've actually been diagnosed with like a lot: bipolar, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, um, yeah, misophonia, all that, and it kind of fluctuates with it a bit. I notice when I know like I read online some people think OCD and misophonia are kind of connected in some way. I feel like that's true. Some for me, for like some of my triggers, like I'll ruminate on it, I'll obsess over it, I'll like predict it, and it'll just kind of consume my whole day. I feel like that kind of relates with my OCD a bit. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've yeah, I've always had it.
And what were you? I'm curious, like going back to kind of like that around that time when you had the parent teacher interview. That was um, a couple of years after. I guess you said you started having panic attacks. Were there? I mean, do you remember things going on in the house? I mean, you mentioned things with your brothers. I'm curious if not that there's any direct causal effect that's known, but I'm just kind of curious because a lot of us have had kind of things we observed and witnessed that kind of maybe um, you could understandably hijack our nervous system and maybe cause some issues. I'm just curious if you can get into maybe some of the stuff that's happening around that time.
yeah, my family life is really chaotic. I guess around that time, I think throughout my whole life, even now, there's been a lot of anger in the house.
Mm.
I think all of us are like really highly sensitive people, but none of us have the tools to regulate strong emotions when they arise. So there's always a lot of tension in the house, and everyone absorbed everyone's negative energy. Like everyone would just feed off of it. Um, and I think, yeah, no one really knew how to like appropriately respond to certain triggering situations. So I think that probably um, kind of increased my anxiety around that age. I also I'm very sensitive to like the foods I eat. I think that also played a role. Um, like even now, I get really anxious when I eat a lot of sugar or gluten or dairy. Like that plays a huge factor in my anxiety. Um, and I think that did back then. Also, I had a lot of like I don't know. I think separation anxiety is the right word. I would get like really anxious when any one of my family members would leave, and that could trigger a kind of like a meltdown as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I don't know. I think I tried to hide my anxiety from a very young age, so I just like go in my room and express it that way. I wouldn't really show it in front of the
How
family.
would you express it at that age in your room by yourself?
Um, usually just cry, I
Okay.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Gotcha.
don't really know. I think yeah, as I got older, it kind of stayed the same. I guess just went to my room and cried. Or if I was like angry, I'd I don't know, hit something on myself.
Yeah. Was there any? And it sounds like you said like people just kind of feeding off each other, like something would get triggered and it would just kind of get worse. Was there any anyone at any a time during these situations trying to be maybe the voice of reason kind of thing? Was there any consoling, comforting? Like, how did you get over some of these things? Was it just you just had to go and cry it out? That what was the routine in the family?
um, my mom is like the more of the calmer one in the house, so she would provide the comfort. Um, so I guess yeah, like she helped sometimes. I guess with like misophonia specifically, she's kind of been like she tries to be supportive, but like she doesn't.
Back of her mind doesn't really.
Yeah, she doesn't. She experiences. I feel like everyone in my house has some trigger. Like I know they do, but it's not anywhere to the like extent I experience it. And I have like 50 or 100 triggers. Like I everything
Yeah, yeah,
triggers me, whereas they just have like one or two. So they kind of understand, but like they're more of like I don't know. I feel like before they really understood, it was more just like, oh, you should deal with it. It's kind of a rationally response to that type of feedback I'd get from them.
right.
Um,
Kind of like kind of outthink it. Like use your kind of prefrontal cerebral cortex to just kind of like change your thinking. Kind of I mean, a CBT approach, which works in some situations, but might not get to that kind of root cause all the time.
mhm.
Just kind of snap out of it.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah.
And
I'm
so,
sorry.
and what about and so your other family members to this point? I mean, did the misophonia cause like I don't know, separation or rift kind of between yourself and other family members? Because
Oh,
you said
that's
your mom was the initial trigger. Did it? And now you see 50 to 100. I'm assuming maybe the other family members also kind of became triggers and
yeah. Everyone in the family triggers me in some
yeah.
way. Um, yeah, I guess it. Yeah, I know misophonia gets worse over time, and I know my triggers have definitely developed. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I think it was around my teen years whenever I started getting triggered by my other family members.
Yeah.
Um, I know in my household there's a lot of issues with boundaries. So like if a noise bothers me, no one really cares. They're not gonna really accommodate. Like
Mm-hmm.
footsteps in the hallway. Hey, can you walk a little quieter? Hey, can you not slam your door, please? Like no one would listen to me, or like my
Really?
brothers
Okay.
only. Or
Yeah.
like in COVID, one of my biggest triggers was my brother. He would play his bass guitar, and you could like hear it and feel it in every square inch of the house. And he'd turn it up, and he had like a concert grade amplifier, and it was just like pure hell. And he just didn't care at all. Like he was like,
Mm-hmm.
just deal with it. And I remember I many times I went to my bathroom and just like sobbed and like put my hand in my I was just having like a whole like panic attack and breakdown because I couldn't escape the noise, no matter
Yeah.
where in the house I'd go. And it's because my family lives in Houston. It's really hot outside, so I
Mm.
can't just go outside and sit outside because it's just unbearably hot. Like you can't do that.
Humid and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess I've been kind of like tormented in a way with it. But I guess my brothers, they have their own mental health issues, which make it kind of difficult. Because it's like, I don't know. I have some empathy for what they go through, but at the same time, I feel like my needs were never really um, like validated by them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's yeah. Misophonia obviously, and we feel it too, and that kind of probably contributes to our shame and guilt. Is it does we realize that it sounds kind of crazy and it feels like it's not as important, but the effect that it has on us, obviously, if you're ending up in the bathroom sobbing so much, I mean, it is serious and should be validated. You also said something a couple times that I kind of wanted to notice. You mentioned other senses other than hearing, which is something I try to harp on a lot. Obviously, visual triggers. We can get to that. I'm assuming you have visual triggers, but you also mentioned the sense of touch, obviously the vibrations, but then also you said something about food earlier, and I'm really, I'm convinced that it's much more than sound. I don't get to
Hmm.
talk about the food thing as much. Do you want to go into a little bit about your other sensitivities? And do you feel like you mentioned some of your notes that it's related to stress a little bit? I don't. Do you want to talk about a little bit of that, because I'm sure people can relate to kind of other senses other than hearing that can kind of get triggered.
Yeah, I think I've read a few times that people with misophonia can also have the visual aspect with
Yeah,
it.
misokinesia. Yep.
Yeah, I definitely have that. I remember like my first trigger, when I was young, maybe like 8, 9, was like my brother. He would like play with his ear as like a form of self soothing, and something about that just really bugged me. And if I told him to stop, he would just not stop,
Mm,
and that just drove me insane. Or just seeing people chew gum, if I can't hear them and I could see them like at the corner of my eye, it drives me like insane as much as it would if the noise was actually happening.
mm-hmm.
Or if people like have like restless leg syndrome, like in class or something, that really bugs me. Um, as far as the other senses, yeah, I guess since my brother plays bass, I'm very sensitive to vibrations. Um, if there's like stomping or something, even if I can't hear it, if I feel it, it like gives me the same feeling. Or music from a neighbor in like a college dorm or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that'll really stress me out. Um, and as far as the food thing, I think I don't know what I put in the notes.
Well, I guess you mentioned IBS, which may be a little bit different. You mentioned that.
Oh, right, right. Um, I was okay. Wait, I'll tackle.
Oh, then you mentioned food earlier, so now I'm probably confusing the situation. But I just gotta say when you mentioned other senses, because I was like, oh, taste, maybe taste, because um,
Yeah, I get it with smell. It's
yeah, let's
very
talk about that. Yeah.
yeah. But it's like with smell, it's like mostly in the mornings. Like if I'm woken up by a smell like toast or coffee, like it just really angers me. I don't know why. No one else I know experiences that. I just I just hate it because like I can't fall back asleep if I have that smell. It's just so like overwhelming when people
Yeah.
like barely smell it or something. Yeah. With that IBS thing, I don't think that's really related to
Mm-hmm.
my misophonia, but I think it's related to my anxiety because my
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and stress levels have been so high pretty much my whole
Yeah.
life. I think that's really thrown off like my gut
Yep.
microbiome, stuff like that. I have like chronic pain. No one knows why, and I think it's because of stress and anxiety, and
Mm-hmm.
misophonia definitely plays a big role in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and do you want to talk a little bit about, we did talk about the parent teacher thing. How did you get through school? Like, did you get accommodations at all?
Yeah, yeah, I had to get accommodations. Um, my main one that I used that really helped me was white noise headphones. Some people won't allow it, but I have these non-Bluetooth. I actually have them right here. These non-Bluetooth wired headphones,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just charge them and put them on, and they have helped me in every college exam I've taken.
Yeah.
Um, if I don't have those, I have um, earplugs. Those help.
Yep.
I also have accommodations for like a private room or a room with not as many people. But even then, I've been in a room with one other person and they've had a cold and they're just sniffling the whole time. And it's just like I'm on the verge of tears because I'm already stressed for the
Yeah.
exam. The person next to me like needs a tissue.
Right.
That's happened a few times and that's really stressful. Because, yeah, not a lot of professors really understand what it is. They give me the accommodations, but they don't fully get it. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. What about friends growing up? Did you at school and otherwise? How did you tell people? Did they notice?
I didn't really tell people just because it's like, strange. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really make sense to someone who's never experienced it. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to appear like, you know, really weird or anything.
Right.
I think I think sometimes if someone's really bugging me, I'll say, hey, could you try not to make that noise? But then again, that comes off as like trying to be controlling or bossy or whatever. So I
Right.
just try not to say anything as much as
Yeah.
possible. But I guess
You have to probably like hold it in a lot then if you're, if your best friend or somebody, or you're going to a movie theater. We can get into kind of like things that. Sorry, I'm moving my hands a lot. I don't know if that's a trigger, but
no, that's not.
we can get into your coping methods and things you had to avoid and whatnot. But yeah, how did you deal with like you probably have friends who trigger you.
Yeah. If it's eating and they don't have a lot on their plate, I'll just deal with it. But if it's like I don't
Ten
know,
course meal, then
yeah,
you're
I'm like I need a break.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Usually I have some stamina, but if it's like I know you mentioned movie theaters, that's a huge trigger for me. Like I tried to watch Barbie last summer with my boyfriend and I was like nearly crying the whole time because
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I was looking at the seats and the people next to me and I was like, they don't have food. This is great. And then this lady pulls out a
Yeah,
bag of popcorn from her purse. And I was like, oh my God. And she's just smacking
yeah,
away. And
yeah.
I'm like, how can anyone focus when this is going on? And
I don't
my
know.
boyfriend doesn't ever get triggered by noises, so he's just like, okay, I'll switch with you. And then the person next to me was chewing like some like chewy candy, and I was like, oh my god, like I didn't even focus on the movie. I was just too
Yeah,
distracted with being angry, and I said to him, I'm like, I'm not doing this again. Like I can't go to movie theaters. Like it just
right.
the movie for me.
Yeah, regular theater and like concerts. Oh well, symphony concerts are no better. But yeah, okay. Well, you mean speaking of your boyfriend doesn't get triggered? How did he? Did you tell him right away? Did he know? Like, how does he? I mean, obviously he's switching seats. That's nice.
Yeah, I think I told him pretty early on. I don't exactly remember when, but he triggers my misophonia, of course. So he knows he's like the receiving end of my,
Mm-hmm.
neuroticism
Glare and all
when it
that.
comes
Yeah.
to that. So he tries his best to be really like supportive and accommodating to me, but there are things he can't control, like his breathing. Like I can't make him stop breathing. Like there's some triggers he does. Like I don't. I'm allowed to talk about triggers, right? Or
Yeah,
will it?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, like a big one is like TMJ, like jaw clicking.
Yes.
I don't
Okay,
know if like
okay.
anyone notices that, but like my ex had it really badly. Um, and it's probably like a fourth of the reason I broke up with him because
Mm-hmm.
it was just intolerable.
Right.
And my current boyfriend like has it like it's very soft, but it's still like so like I don't know, anger
Yeah,
inducing.
yeah, yeah. Did anyone in your family have it when you grew up? I'm just kind of curious if there was any continuity in with that kind of sound.
No.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know if this is sidetracking. My last relationship was really abusive, so maybe I interpret that noise with like a lot more like hatred and anger than I
Yeah.
would have otherwise. Um, but yeah, no one else in my family has that. I mean, there's some eating noises in my family that bother me, but not that specific one.
Gotcha. When yeah, and I jump around too, so I was just thinking when you mentioned when you found out that it had a name, did you tell your family? And I mean, I don't know if you covered this already, but I'm just curious if their reactions changed at all.
Um, yeah, my mom. I don't know if it was my mom or I that found it. One of us found it. I remember talking to her about it, and she's like, "Oh, like it's a real thing. Like this is good. Like you're not alone." But no, I don't think anyone else really understood.
Mm-hmm.
I know, sorry, I know my mom, she has a couple misophonia triggers. Like one of them is like nail picking, but it doesn't elicit nearly the same reaction as a sound would from me, So
Right.
I don't know.
I'm curious now. What's the situation? What's the we cover? I mean, dads come up a lot in the conversation because many, you know, a lot of us have had I don't know dads who've had temper issues and whatnot. I'm just kind of curious, briefly, but like, what's his deal? It was was there you did mention a lot of tension in the household. I'm just kind of curious what he contributed.
Yeah, my dad, he's he's a very like caring, generous man, but he also has really bad anger issues.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like can be really sweet and genuine and kind, and also just be really explosive.
Like, would
So
it flip like pretty quickly?
yeah, um, a lot of yelling, a lot of tension, passive aggressiveness, and it can just switch like yeah. So a lot of
Right.
like inconsistent emotions I had to deal with, or like walking on eggshells, I guess.
Well, unknown boundaries. You didn't know necessarily when you were gonna when things would change. You had to
No,
be on guard all the time.
yeah, and my dad and one of my brothers they still kind of have a really strained relationship. They get on each other's nerves all the time. So there's there was one point where there was an argument like every day for like
Mm.
2 years, like
Hmm.
there was a lot of tension in the house. There was no you couldn't really relax. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you? I mean, you obviously went through school and are doing well. I'm just kind of curious for people who are listening, who maybe if people have a lot of walking in eggshells situations. Like, what were your coping methods like at home, and how did you kind of like make it through school and you know stay positive and be successful?
With the like anger. Sorry, I
Yeah,
see.
with all that tension at home, but somehow you made it through. You went through college.
Oh yeah.
You had good grades and all that stuff.
That's a good question. I think it's just like I don't know.
Okay.
That's a really good one. How did I make it through? Um I guess I'm just used to it growing up, and I think school I that was like one of my consistencies.
Yeah.
Even though I
Okay.
like hate it, it's still like one of my consistencies.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of
That makes
helped
sense.
me. Yeah. But with that being said, like I know I have my degrees and whatever. Like school has been always been a real struggle for me because of my ADHD and misophonia. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't easily get good grades at all. Like I have to try like 5 times harder than anyone in my class to
Mm-hmm.
do well. So that's been kind of discouraging. And then there's also like the home situation. Like both of my brothers, I mentioned to you. I don't know if I mentioned here, but they have schizoaffective disorder. So they've been in and out of psychotic episodes, and I still have to keep on doing school and stuff. And I guess after going through that, I can go through anything and do school because
Yeah.
yeah, they're I don't know, psychosis is no joke. Living with two of them that go in and out sometimes at the same time is terrifying. And also just like visiting them at the mental hospital, like my brother, who's like they're my best friends, and then they go through these psychotic episodes, and their whole personality changes, and you just see this like shell of what they once were. Like that's really disturbing, and I think that kind of contributed a lot to my mental health issues. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and
You said a few things there, and I know. Oh, it sounds like we're straying, but I don't think we are. But you said you're like obviously they didn't weren't validating your misophonia. You just said that they're your best friends, and then you had probably had to observe. Being that close, you probably had to observe, always on guard to look for these changes. Um, how do you? So there must have been good times because if you consider them your best friends, I'm just kind of curious. Do you want to dive a little bit more into the relationship? Because I think we're all interested in, um, you know, there are good times and then things flip, and I think it's part of misophonia is that we're always kind of like very susceptible or noticing these changes. I don't know. I'm kind of babbling here, but I'm just kind of curious to hear a little bit more about your relationship with your brothers.
yeah, my brothers, they're both very highly sensitive people. Obviously, both very intelligent, very creative individuals. Yeah, you can have like really stimulating conversations with them. Like when they're not in psychosis, they're very switched on. You know, one of my brothers like builds robots. Like he doesn't have any education. He just builds them. And it's incredible. The other one um, does these really cool art pieces. He's in culinary school, cooks really amazing dishes. So they're people of like a lot of substance, but they sometimes destabilize and enter these
Mm-hmm.
states, and they become quite honestly unbearable to be around. Like I know they're struggling, but they get aggressive, rude. Um, it's just like no one like we're all scared of the person who's in psychosis. Like yeah, never like there's never consistency. I
Yeah.
guess with them. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. No, thanks for shedding light on that. Yeah, a lot of stuff. You definitely had to be on guard for a lot of stuff growing up, and it's just it's kind of an well, I don't want to compare stuff, but it seems like an amplification of something a lot of people with misophonia kind of go through. Do we can kind of I'd love to talk also about you want to talk about uh, diet and other kind of coping methods. Do you want to share anything about that?
Um.
The ketogenic diet you mentioned and supplements and other kind of remedies. I'm kind of curious. Sounds like you've experimented with stuff, or maybe want to try some things out, or Red stuff.
Yeah. I definitely want to experiment. I haven't fully experimented, but I know there's a lot more information about like diet, nutrition, all that helping mental health. And I wonder if that can also be applied to misophonia. I know I've read online, I haven't tried them, but there are like homeopathic remedies for sound sensitivities. It'd be interesting to know if anyone's tried that for misophonia, or if that could be like a future therapy.
Direction. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything to my knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know they use them sometimes for anxiety and depression. So I don't know, maybe for misophonia too.
So did somebody actually diagnose you with misophonia? And what kind
Yeah,
of doctor
so
was that?
I saw two audiologists because I
Okay.
don't know who else to see. Um, and they both, one of them like officially diagnosed me, if that's a thing. I mean, she said I
It
had
wasn't
it.
like DSM thing, so yeah. I was just kind of curious, like what are they? If you knew what they put it under, sometimes they kind of piggyback it on anxiety, some kind of anxiety, or some or some audiological thing. And so I'm curious, did they offer any kind of help, whether um, CBT or medication or something?
Um, they offered the hearing
Oh, the
aids.
Widex kind of the
Yeah, but they were really expensive, and
yes,
I didn't really see them helping, and I didn't really want to wear them every day. So I was like, I I got them. I actually did get them, but I only used them for like a week because I hated
yeah.
how it felt, and I was like, I don't see this doing anything besides teaching me to avoid it even more. So I don't know. I just kind of gave up with that. I'm sure there's some science to it, but I don't know. I feel like there's another way to treat
It
misophonia.
seemed like it was just kind of tuned white noise,
Hmm.
and so you can probably get that from what you were doing in your exams and whatnot.
Yeah, so there was no point with that.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as
Okay.
medication goes, I've never been prescribed anything for misophonia, but I've found my medications I'm on currently, like lithium and lamictal, help, and then also the beta blocker propranolol. That one helps me a lot. It was just like anxiety levels because propranolol like blocks the fight or flight response
Yep.
basically. Um, so that helps a
I know
little
that
bit.
that is starting to get some attention for research, so it's interesting that you are,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Cool.
for misophonia
Yeah,
very early.
I take it.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. What did you mention? Some of the other medications that you're taking for some other issues?
Yeah, lithium and lamictal,
Okay.
those have helped just like my anxiety levels. I mean, I'm still not like 100%, but
Yeah.
they help like with the like really extreme, anxiety and extreme
Right.
reactions to misophonia.
Yeah.
Um, I also know things like ADHD stimulants and just other stimulants have made it so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Drinking alcohol like the day after, like a hangover, just like that kind of feeling that'll make my misophonia worse.
Yeah.
Uh,
What did you mean by ADHD stimulants? They give you stimulants for ADHD. I'm kind of ignorant about how they treat ADHD, I guess.
yeah, so there's many treatments, but I guess like the most popular ones are stimulants,
Mm.
and those are like Adderall,
Okay,
Vyvanse.
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yes.
um, I find those really activating, especially Vyvanse. For some reason, that one just made me like, you know, completely crazy. Like any misophonia trigger, I would just like lose my shit. Basically,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was yeah, wasn't wasn't the best. So I stopped that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And yeah, very. What about any? Did you see any psychologists, pure psychologists, about non medication um, treatments or therapies for misophonia?
Um, I'm currently trying to find one now.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of my therapists I've had hadn't even heard of
Heard
misophonia.
it?
Like
Yeah,
my current
yeah,
one, never heard of it. So I'm like, oh, okay. Um,
yeah.
so I found this podcast through Cresta. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. on her. I forgot her website, but it was on her website, and
Misophonia Freedom Lab. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Do you know her? Like, have you communicated with her?
yeah. I had a phone call with her
Okay.
actually, like a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Oh,
was.
yeah. Did you say that she suggested you come on the podcast, or was that somebody else?
No, she just suggested I listen to it, and then I
Okay.
thought, oh, might as well go on it if I
Yeah,
can.
yeah. Because she's been on it a few times. I don't know if you've heard
Yeah,
her
yeah,
out. So that's, yeah. Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Um, Very cool. And then, and I mean, and maybe, you're like you said at the beginning, you've got neuroscience and psychology. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your early thoughts are about what you want to do with those degrees in vis-a-vis misophonia? And maybe we can talk into, I don't know if you have any kind of theories as to how you might want to approach misophonia, things that you'd want to explore.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult trying to combine psychology and neuroscience in like a graduate level for some reason, but
Hmm.
unless I go into neuropsychology and a clinical psychology PhD program is what I've found. But I think I would probably try and get my master's in clinical psychology and then go from there. Um, I'm also very interested in nutrition, so I want to combine those somehow. I don't
Hmm.
know how, but that's my goal. As far as misophonia treatment, I don't really know how I'd approach misophonia.
Mm.
Um, I know I've been reading on Cresta's website the different success stories, and I find all of those really interesting, like the trauma based healing and like nervous system
Hmm.
healing, stuff like that. So I'd probably incorporate that. I feel like diet is a really underrated part of mental
Yeah.
health. I think if you have, your diet under control like really well, I feel like mental health symptoms also just go down too.
Hmm.
Um, and cutting out like alcohol and other substances. Um, but yeah, I don't really have a specific way I think I'd treat it. I would just go based off of the research at that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, what you're saying right, I think is correct. I think it's worth exploring the trauma based, because I think, and anyone who's listening knows that I think a lot of this is related to stuff that happened to us growing up. I mean, you're probably a good case in point, a candidate for like stuff happened growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it happens to everybody equally. I think there's also maybe some genetic predisposition, diet kind of things. Like these are all factors that kind of play against each other. That's why I don't think there's going to be one research paper that's going to come out and solve it. It's going to be um, pretty personalized, but these are all
Yeah,
factors.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like it is. It's like anxiety. It's a really personalized journey to healing it, and everyone
Yeah,
is different. So I guess that might be similar with misophonia.
right. Do you want to talk a little bit about your you mentioned a conspiracy theory, which I don't think is such a conspiracy theory, but the effect of technology on misophonia potentially.
Yeah,
Safe
this
space,
one.
talk about whatever you want. Just go on whatever tangents.
Yeah, so I don't have like any real science, but I just have a theory because I noticed like once I started using an iTouch and using headphones was when I got misophonia. And
Hmm.
I don't know if maybe like because I had the technology at such a young age, maybe it caused my misophonia to come sooner than average. Um, I also know I've been doing a little bit of research on this, but I don't know like enough to really speak too much on it. But I know uh, there's like EMF frequency sensitivities, and some people have that, and it can increase anxiety, fatigue, depression, insomnia, all that stuff. I feel like that could play a role.
Hmm.
And I know because like I've tried this myself, I know that whenever I turn off or turn my phone on airplane mode, so like the cellular
Mm,
is off and the Wi-Fi is off, and I go to bed, I actually sleep a lot better than if I have
mm-hmm,
it on. And I've
mm-hmm,
tested that over the past like couple years, so I generally turn it off,
mm-hmm.
which kind of supports my point. Um, and like the other thing kind of related to that is that technology releases positive ions, and those can negatively affect mental health. I have a little list here. I think online it said mental health can increase inflammation, mood swings, chronic pain, anxiety, irritation, allergies, all of that. And there's technology all around us, like everywhere: Wi-Fi, computers, cell phones, um, fluorescent lighting. I know that's one of them. Like toxic paints, air pollution, stuff like that. I feel like that could probably be affecting all of us in some way and maybe worsening misophonia, anxiety, other symptoms. I wouldn't be surprised if that comes out in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, there's people who think your radio waves and things are affecting. It does you sometimes fall into the conspiracy, you know, and I don't know what all the studies are. Usually, a lot of that's those tend to be debunked in the media, and but I feel like there is at least a technological aspect in terms of we're things are affecting things are hitting our senses differently than they used to, in kind of
Yeah.
less organic ways. Things are just kind of more packaged, filtered, and so I'm also wondering if, like, not um, well, I mean, not hearing things always organically coming through headphone speakers mastered in recording studios all the time, if that's somehow messing with how we perceive sound, our relationship to sound.
Yeah, and also with that, I feel like some people are probably more sensitive to those effects than others.
Right.
Like with anything really. Which is why sometimes I think when the media debunks things, I don't really believe it because everyone responds differently to things.
Yep.
So you might have a group of test subjects who aren't affected by it, or maybe one or two of them are, and then you'll say, oh, like 90% weren't affected, so, it's BS. But I don't.
You mentioned, and I totally agree. Things affect everybody differently, and that's all part of evolution. Evolution is about, we're all kind of slightly different experiments. You mentioned the term highly sensitive person. Do you know that that's a real term? And do you identify as one?
Yes, I feel like most people in my family do too.
Do they
But yeah.
openly? Do they use that term themselves, or you kind of like see that in everybody? I'm curious if they
Um,
have any kind of self awareness
yeah,
in
no,
that sense.
they do. I think at least one of my brothers has used that term before. Yeah. I mean, we've all been labeled as sensitive
Yeah,
uh, growing up. Even like my dad, I think we're all very like in tune with
yeah.
others, but like we don't know how to like handle those feelings, so it just
That's
comes out.
fascinating. Yeah, in tune, but not very empathetic.
Yeah, yeah, it's like this like confused state of
Could I
my life.
ask what maybe maybe I should have asked this earlier about how your dad's and or mom's childhoods were like? Were they also dealing with, you know, because usually this doesn't just kind of pop up. I'm just kind of curious if they also had adversity.
Yeah, neither of my parents had schizoaffective disorder or anything like that, like
Mm-hmm.
my brothers do, which is kind of strange. But growing up, my dad, he went to boarding school at a very young age, and I think that was really traumatic for him. Um, my mother, I don't think she had much adversity. She might correct me on that. I don't know. Um, but yeah, maybe some conflict with
Mm-hmm.
um, siblings, but nothing out of the
Yeah.
ordinary. I think, yeah.
What about? other family members outside of your nuclear family, how do they, I don't know, maybe talk to them about about misophonia, but also kind of like, do they know what kind of family, what family life was kind of like for you guys growing up?
Um, we kind of keep um like the extreme mental illness stuff out of conversations with people. Like not
Mm-hmm.
many people know. But I guess with misophonia, I know my mom's sister, so my aunt, she has it. Not as
Mm-hmm.
bad as me, but she has it like decently bad. Um, so there's probably some genetic component. I just got like the worst of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gotcha. And have you met anybody else like at school or trying to think? Did we already talk about it? Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Do you know many people with anybody with misophonia?
Outside of the family, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Um, I try and explain it to people. Like I've explained it to my roommate, and she's been very kind about it. But she says she understands, and like if there's anything I need to let her know, and then she'll like chew gum next to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Classic.
well, I don't
Yeah.
think you really understand. Like she's not doing it to you know try and hurt me or anything.
Right.
She's just unaware of how it affects me.
Yeah.
So
How
yeah,
was it
no.
going? How was it going into dorms? Did you have to kind of do a little bit of reconnaissance, like get prepared for that?
Um, I guess because of COVID, I was never in dorms, but I was in like student housing, which I
Hmm.
still consider dorms in a way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that really bugs me because I had upstairs neighbors and they were really heavy footed. That would drive
Mm.
me crazy. And then the neighbors next to me would like put their speaker up to the wall and just like turn it to like volume 100. And I'm like, oh my god, this is crazy. And then like my roommate would be like burning something in the kitchen, so I'd have that smell too. It was just like
Okay.
such an overwhelming experience every
Right.
day. So the next year I actually requested the top floor and like the quietest room, and so far it's been pretty good. I haven't really had many issues besides footsteps, but that's I can't tell people to not walk. And my room backs up against a stairwell, so sometimes that's loud, but
Yeah.
it's a lot better than it was my sophomore year of college. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So you're now graduating, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
You're
Yes, I
so.
graduated.
Did you say you're taking a break, or are you going to jump right into your master's?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a year out to gain
Okay.
more clinical experience, I think. Yeah.
Gotcha. And how are you going to do that? Just connect with a therapist and kind of like be. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah. So currently I'm a research assistant for a research lab. And I do some volunteer work, but I want to be paid. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for like a clinical job, maybe like a mental health technician. There's not really many choices for
Right.
a bachelor's in psychology, so I just kind of have to go with whatever I find.
Right. 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 Gotcha. No. Well, I mean, yeah. I hope this is the beginning of a long and fruitful career in clinical therapy and also research. It sounds like you're, yeah, kind of the sky's the limit, and you have many ways you can go. So that's great. I mean, we've covered, and we're coming up to like an hour. Hopefully, this flew by. I know you were maybe like some people kind of nervous at the beginning. Hopefully, it kind of like has been fairly natural. Curious, you had a bunch of notes that you gave me, and you probably have in front of you. Anything else that you want to share with the audience about your experience, your thoughts on misophonia?
Yeah. When I was around like 15, I was like wrongly put on antidepressants because I feel like it's like a known thing you shouldn't put people who have bipolar disorder on antidepressants. But I was on Prozac and I got like really depressed. Like I was like, you know, not not okay. My misophonia was terrible then. And I don't know if this is more of a sensitive topic, but I found it like a note to my misophonia. It was very hopeless. I don't want to say like suicide note, but it was pretty similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of it was about misophonia and just addressing the shame and guilt and rage I experienced with it, and how it ruined every relationship for me. And I would just like sit in my room and cry. I couldn't do anything, so I was just getting triggered all the time. I couldn't hang out with people. I was missing out on quality family time, friends time, stuff like that. I think that was definitely my low point with misophonia. I don't think I've been that bad, but I was definitely um, I felt really hopeless around that time. Um,
Do you remember
yeah,
write? Do you remember writing that note, or was it just
I think vaguely.
yeah?
Yeah, I used to write like diary notes whenever I was like raged, but that one was like really, um, I don't know, had a lot of um, really depressing stuff in it. Just a lot
Yeah,
about
no,
how,
I was just wondering if that was related to the wrong prescriptions that you were on, and maybe you just kind of
yeah,
set you in that state.
yeah. I mean, like I said before, I was struggling with anxiety since I was like 6 or something.
Yeah.
Um, so I've always had something, but I think the antidepressants made everything so much worse for me. Um, until I found mood stabilizers, and then suddenly my world like lifted up and was
Mm,
happy.
right.
So,
Um.
but
Yeah, because you mentioned the shame and guilt and missing out. But some people call it misophonia grief, because there's a loss associated with these um experiences, moments that we can't have. I guess I kind of glossed over it because it sounded like your childhood was so chaotic and there was a lot of non-validation. So I figured there'd be some shame and guilt, but I guess I wasn't sure how much if how much you felt you lost because I don't know how much quality time there was, but then I'm starting to learn that there was some quality time. I mean, you're
mm-hmm.
obviously love your brothers and whatnot, so it sounds like a very I mean, it just just goes to show. It sounds like it was a very like um I don't want to use the term a bipolar childhood, but it did flip like back and forth a lot from highs and lows.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I missed out on a lot. That's um definitely true. I think
Were the rest of your family very close, even though there were a lot of stuff going on, and you were kind of a little bit more on the outside?
um not really. I think it was just more like if we were all having a good time and like my mother's voice was annoying me, I'd have to remove myself and then I'd be
Hmm.
missing out on like a family bonding time.
Yeah.
And that would really upset me, or just um being yeah, just I want to be in the room with my family, but I can't. Um like a lot of a lot of my life is like trying to avoid the next misophonia trigger, or just like finding ways to deal with it if it comes up. Like it's never just I can never just relax in like a public space or a space with other people. Um, it's not even always people who trigger me. Like inanimate objects that like beep or tick will trigger me, or like dogs or something if they like lick their paws. Like I have so many triggers. It's just
Yeah.
not
I
only
was gonna
humans.
ask, like, do you ever do any, I don't know, self care kind of stuff where you just kind of get away for a while?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Leaving the situation has been helpful. I have a white noise machine I use every night because I'm a really light sleeper. My white noise headphones. I also put pillows or towels under my door, which helps with certain outside noises.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else do I do? I know, like, in car rides when you can't escape, car rides were always like one of my biggest triggers, and they still are.
Yep.
Um, but I would always still do, have to have my headphones on me. Um, and then I can calm down if I put those in. So,
Yeah. Does
Those
it
are the
help even just knowing that they're there? Sometimes just knowing that that they are there kind of like brings down the stress level, which
yeah, definitely. I carry my headphones or my AirPods with me like wherever I go, and like if they're dead, like really stresses me out, or if I can't find them, it stresses me out.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, no, yeah, no, yeah. There's a definitely we all have the oh fuck when we realize it's not in our pocket.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and, that, and that yeah, that brings up another thing. So I tell myself I'm gonna take them everywhere, but if I haven't been triggered for a while, it's easy to forget that you have it until you get screwed by that trigger.
Hmm.
Because we don't, like you said, I think at the beginning, the worst time to talk about or think about misophonia is when you're in the middle of a trigger, because you are like in Incredible Hulk mode.
Hmm.
But I find when I'm not triggered, I don't want to think about, or I'm not thinking about misophonia. I'm trying to use my time, and then I get kind of screwed because I'm kind of lose my edge. I mean, it sounds like you were. Well, maybe we can talk about it. I mean, something you kind of grew up being used to being on the edge all the time. I don't know if that has that's still something that you live with, and that's why you're always kind of thinking about preparing for the next moment.
Yeah. I'm definitely always on edge. If not with misophonia, with other stuff too. Like there's a growing up, I had to tiptoe a lot
Yeah.
around my family members, so I have to be like hyper aware of everything so I can like protect myself if something happens, if someone gets angry, whatever. Um, so I think that definitely has worsened my misophonia.
Do you ever? I don't know if you've thought back. Obviously, you had to protect yourself, but I sometimes wonder if part of it is you feel like you need to protect the person who's losing their temper, or you're trying to get validation from I don't know validation from them, or trying to calm them down in a way before you calm yourself down. I feel like a lot of it is like we were we're kind of like in good or the misophonia is looking for danger not just for ourselves but maybe also to look for a warning sign that might set off that parent or that other family member. I'm curious if you've ever thought of it that way, because when I think about it that way I almost think of it as a miss I don't want to say misused but maybe unneeded empathetic warning system, almost a positive thing that kind of like has been causing other problems. I'm getting a little bit philosophical, but I'm just kind of curious if you've ever kind of thought of it that way.
No, I haven't. That's a really interesting take. Yeah, I don't think I.
Because I mean, as a child, you kind of like obviously you want to protect yourself, but I think you're not so disconnected from your parents because in the grand scheme of things you were kind of recently born. I've heard like for a few years your brain almost hasn't fully separated from the parent. So I'm just kind of I kind of think about, is it a child who's trying to protect themselves or is kind of trying to protect the parent, from whatever may be setting them off? Because a lot of us have had like your dad or going from normal to like being set off temper. I've had people with alcoholic parents, schizophrenic parents, and there seems to be a lot of walking on eggshells and listening. But I'm wondering if there's an aspect which is like trying to protect the parent in a way as that child.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Not many people have. I just it just kind of like came up as I've talked to people like Cresta, um, on the podcast. It's an interesting intake, and I'm wondering if there's some way to kind of work through that can kind of be part of a treatment on the psychological side.
Yeah, that's that's really interesting. No, I've never thought of that. That'd be
Cool.
worth investigating.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's just part of why I find this a fascinating topic. It's more than just an aversion to specific sounds. It's
Yeah.
many layers.
Hmm. I guess one analogy, I don't know if it's an analogy, something I like to tell people to help them understand
Hmm.
my misophonia is like It's like if someone took a rubber band and was just like flicking it on like the same spot and it becomes like raw over time, and they just keep flicking it, and then you ask that person to stop, and they're like you're just overreacting. And it's like, no, you're like flicking me. Like that's kind of like how I don't for people who don't have misophonia, that's like the best I can kind of explain it, because like I kind of use that or I did that on my boyfriend. I gently I took like a little rubber band and I flicked it, and I'm like, this is what one noise sounds like, and then over time that repetitive,
Accumulation. Yeah.
yeah. And then it's also like, for me, it's like if the rubber band was held in like the up position on your skin, but it hasn't been released yet, and that's like the
Okay.
anticipation of the noise. It's just like, you know, it's like there on you, and
Yeah.
it's gonna kind of the only way I
I
can
haven't heard
really.
that. Now. That's really cool. That makes a lot of
I don't know if
sense.
that's relatable, but
Yeah. No, I mean I get what you're saying. It's like little things can accumulate and kind of break down the skin barrier and just kind of make that skin really raw.
yeah, and then you
And
just
it's to
end.
the outsider, you're like, oh, I'm just doing a little flick, but no, it's like it started when I was like 4 years old. You don't
Yeah,
understand. This
so like
is
one little flick can trigger a,
right.
whereas, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of. I've even used the analogy. I don't know if this is too extreme, but like someone put like alcohol on like an open wound. That's like the rage, and
Oh,
then people are like, "Why are you reacting like that? Like you're so dramatic."
right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Have you had people literally say that like you're being dramatic, or to the point where you get embarrassed and
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely, definitely. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment around misophonia. People are like, "Oh, like, just look away, or just, move away. You're being irrational, you're dramatic, being bitchy, rude, um,
does that has that
bossy."
affected your social life in terms of like being bullied maybe or like a
Um,
lot of passive aggressive probably.
I remember I had like this one friend. We don't like each other anymore, but she was really rude a lot of the time, and she would like smack her food and her candy and stuff really loudly, and I was like, "Hey, could you please not do that? It's really loud." And she's like, "Oh, you're being like dramatic, and like it's your problem, stuff like that." So I've
Right.
definitely had that, but um I don't know. I don't really socialize much, so I don't get that
Yeah.
anymore. I have
That's the way
like
to solve it. Yeah.
three or four, yeah, I have like three or four friends, and I'm pretty open with them, so
Yeah.
I don't get those responses. I feel like if I were to tell a stranger, that would probably be different. I have yet to do that, um, but I've been really close to telling strangers, like, "Hey, look, I'm triggered," but then I doubt they would even understand what I was saying. So
Yeah. We've all kind of made those calculations and many of us land on the side of if we're not going to see them 30 seconds from now, is it really worth it?
yeah,
Or
that's
even
kind
if
of,
it's 2 hours from now, yeah.
yeah. Or it's like in school, or college, like everyone kind of like finds a seat on the first day and they stick to it. Um,
No,
Sometimes
where do you
people.
go? Are you a front person or a back? Are you a front person or a
I'm
back person?
a front person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like looking at people in front of me
Yeah.
because of like the visual. But sometimes I'll get the person next to me or behind me chewing gum, and I'm like, I can't move across the classroom because like someone else sits there, and it's just obvious if I just suddenly move.
Right.
Um, so I just have to deal with it. I'll sometimes do like the glaring face, but like they're not really gonna understand why I'm glaring at them. I just
Right.
like hope they do. Because it's like, how could you make such an offensive noise and not care about the people around you? But in their head, they're paying
Right.
attention.
Is that when
Professors.
did you crank up the white noise a little bit? Like, do you have
I
AirPods on it?
I don't wear them in class.
Okay.
Only during test taking. Um, I've thought about it, but I feel like it would be like, I don't know, too muffling maybe.
Mm.
Um,
Because the new AirPods, the AirPod Pros and whatnot, they're supposed to have conversational awareness, so they kind of can block out that the a-hole behind you, chewing gum, but can kind of
interesting.
Increase the voice of coming towards you. So I would think, I haven't been in school in way too long, but like I would think that they could maybe kind of like rebalance things a little bit. Cool. Well, Georgie, I mean, this has been great. I know, if there is more stuff that you want to talk about, I'd love to hear about it now or in the future. But I know, but this has already been quite a informative episode. I want to thank you for sharing everything. Being so candid, and this is going to help a lot of people. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a lot more to share. I'm willing to. I don't know if you're allowed to give out emails, but I'm willing to talk to anyone who wants to reach out to me. I don't know how I do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm definitely going to, obviously people who are listening right now, reach out to me and I can connect you. And that's kind of, that happens quite often. People hear something that resonates with them and then you kind of want to connect with somebody to kind of talk about, little details, because we do have a lot of us have a lot of things in common. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of like saying that, and I'm happy to connect anyone who's listening, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you again, Georgie. As I said, would love to have you on again and again, especially as your career takes off. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. It's often even easier just to send a message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast, follow there, or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, and on X, it's Misophonia Show. Support the show by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. The music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.